Hi there, everyone. Welcome to Dive In. I'm Kristian.
Hey, I'm Jessica Vanden Berg. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us today.
So, the big news, as we all know, is the debate happened on Tuesday night.
Tuesday night.
Was it Tuesday night? Yeah, it was
Yes.
Tuesday night. Okay. And I have so many thoughts.
Good.
Thoughts. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was already, it's Friday today. So when we're recording this, so it's already been a couple days. So there's been, just interesting news after the debate.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's almost as it has been in the Trump era. It's like drinking from a fire hose. You cannot. There's so much going on. There's so much to comment on. There's so many norms that are being broken or whatever. The rules have been rewritten, and as and this, like I said, is a hallmark of the Trump era. But also, I will say that I feel for the first time, I'm going to make a big statement here, Jess.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. For the first time, I feel
some music like da da da.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like that the Democrats have finally responded in a way that could potentially break through.
That's huge. Yeah.
Huge. And
what do you think? Like, can you give me your three examples of how that happened or why that happened?
Well, I think, I think that the Democrats have finally figured out how to run against Trump. I mean, I guess that's what it boils down to. And because Trump is, in some ways he's very, very predictable. Cliches are very predictable, right?
Right.
But
are you saying like because she was able to figure out how to get under his skin and get him to respond, that we've figured out how to run against him? We've used fear or facts or policy, but the reality is he can dig his own grave or something like that.
Well, yeah. And so, there's a few things, and we talk about this often, as I just pointed out, these norms are being broken and everything's kind of been turned upside down. There's that. But then there's also some things that are tried and true, right? That are still the same, even with amongst this chaos. And I think that there was this, belief that we can reason.
Oh, right.
We can reason our way out of this. And again, I'm not saying that's, I'm glad that's their instinct, but it didn't work. I mean, when you're on the stage with Trump, he's going to be the spectacle. So you have to, so if that's the case, this is my opinion. Okay. So please, disagree. If that's the case, and we know that, then make sure you show people his worst self. And that's what she did.
Yeah.
She baited him so beautifully. I don't think I could have done it better.
Well, I mean, yeah, right. I mean, she obviously did a great job in that way. It did in a lot of other ways. I think it worked very well for her. I mean, I couldn't it's easy to sit here and say, oh, it could have been CRISPR or it could have been this or it could have been that. But the biggest thing is like what matters, what comes out of a debate. What matters is like sort of how you feel about it versus what was the actual things that happened. But I agree with you. There was this, it's just really unbelievable. Sometimes you say that. We have to stop saying that. It's believable. Like what he talked about, what he said. And I think it was just shown how, because she was able to respond, which Biden was not, it was really impactful. And he scowled, they had a side-by-side screen. You have this feeling that like JD Vance somehow, who he probably never talks to, called him up or had a conversation with them and told him about these, cat situation with the Haitians, which is a complete lie. And made up and xenophobic and racist and all the bad things that you can say about it, or name that too, the killing of the babies by the Virginia governor, or like just all these crazy things that he continues to talk about and have nothing to do with what matters to people, except the small amount of people who believe in all the conspiracy theories. So yeah, you're wondering what he's doing.
And I think that was her only choice. And I know that there were detractors out there that are like, well, she didn't, we still don't know why she, flip-flopped on fracking. Well, I roll my eyes at that. Because, again, it's been said so often, blah, 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 but Trump flips on everything. And, but I will say that I didn't think she had a choice, given that it's him. And she did it beautifully. I mean, it was, and the other thing that I've noticed about her is that she starts out kind of, I'm not going to say slow, because that's not what I mean, but she always gets better as it goes on. And I noticed this in her speech at the convention. And of course, the other night, she just got better as he got worse. And it was artful, and he can't help himself. And this is obviously the main characteristic of a narcissist. They can't help themselves. And she baited him on all the things that I would have, the crowd size, and how people around the world don't respect him and laugh at him. And then also this idea, I love this, when she said, hey, let's not forget you were fired by the American people. And by the way, he thinks he's the only one that can say that. And so it's like,
you know what my mom picked up on? Which
please.
Like, my mom is my kind of my focus group, because she's mostly Democrat now. She wasn't previously. And Mom, if you're listening to this, hello. But she was like, I can't believe that he still believes that he won the election. And it was like all the lies and all the sort of crazy things. And then when Biden was running, she was considering voting third party, right?
Yeah.
So now she's like on Facebook defending Kamala, like posting I'm with her, and she's like, and she asked me if that was she's like, is that okay? I mean, am I going too far? I said, no, you're actually right on what you're saying. Like, the election wasn't stolen. There aren't babies being killed. The Haitians aren't eating your animals. It's just, interesting. So yeah, I thought that afterwards I felt like this idea that she didn't do enough is, I mean, I always go here, but maybe I'm wrong, is sort of a, you're like, oh, but you won, but you didn't do this.
Right.
So, 5 very specific things that you should have been doing. Whereas, like, it's ridiculous. Like, you can't out and out win the debate and, and then, have all these things that you didn't accomplish. You should just, move past it. Who cares? And so should their team, I think.
Right. And I
ignore it.
Absolutely. And so the other reason why I think it was a great success is because it's still working. Right. I don't know if you caught or you heard about Trump's rally yesterday in Arizona. It was just him relitigating the entire debate and all the things that she baited him on. And, and I'm like, so he can't get over it. Can't get over it. And then she, which I loved yesterday, so it was the perfect split screen, because you had her in North Carolina at this big arena. Forgive me, it was in Charlotte. I don't know the name of the arena. I could look it up for sure. But it was this big arena where there was, almost completely full. And then in contrast to Trump, at some rally in Tucson, where about 400 people showed up.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, that makes it crazy.
Makes it crazy. And so she said at her rally, she started talking about Obamacare. And of course, there was that moment in the debate when he was like, I've got a concept of an idea of a plan, And so she mentioned that, and she said, 45 million people are insured on Obamacare right now. So Trump's plan or Trump's intent is to throw people off of their health care because he has a concept to an idea, to a plan or whatever, whatever he said. Okay. And I'm thinking, okay, two things. First of all, that's great messaging. People understand that, right? But then also, that'll make Trump crazy. So he'll spend all this time talking about that. And so, look, I think that
if you were, you probably, some people who are helping him. If you were, what do you do? Because like the biggest thing, it was so interesting when you heard from the staff before, it was like, well, we just hope that he doesn't, what does he call her? All these nasty names.
Yeah.
We just hope he doesn't do that. Like that was like they set the bar super low.
Yes.
And, what do you think they do with the fallout of it? You can't do anything because he'll do what he's going to do. Or I don't watch cable.
Yeah. Good
so
for
I
you.
I don't see the response from their spin. I don't see it. So
well, here's my take
I'm not
on
on
that.
Twitter that much, so I don't see that either.
Well, here's my take on that. I think so. For example, when Trump went to the 9/11 commemoration,
the next
ceremony,
day after the debate, they were together.
The very next day. So both of his campaign managers were with him. Now, you and I know, Jess, from being campaign staff, what that means. They're babysitting him.
Yeah.
They're babysitting him. In other words, they're trying to keep him from his worst instincts. Okay? So both of them were there. And that's all. And
I didn't know he had two campaign managers. That's interesting
he has
in and of itself.
They're co.
Right.
And I don't know where Corey Lewandowski fits into this, but he's somewhere in in this mix too. But if we're going by titles, but his two campaign managers were there. And the only explanation I have to that is that they're babysitting him. And, that could mean a couple things. Try to keep some inkling of control over him, or just to, prop him up, which we know he needs. I do think that also their main goal coming out of the debate was to
by the way, kind of inappropriate, like to bring a campaign staff to it's a former president situation, not a campaign rally.
Right.
Where he's there because he's former, and bring your campaign staff. That's interesting.
Right. And he brought Vance too. Vance was there too.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And but I think that their goal coming out of the debate was to, when I say they, I mean campaign staff, Trump's campaign staff was trying to make sure there would be no other debate.
Right.
And so then they set up this weird juxtaposition, in my opinion, that, okay, because he was saying, and I'm sure his people said this to him, which was, I won, therefore, why there's no need to debate again. And obviously, going back to when he debated Joe Biden, and we all know what happened there, what was he trying to do when he actually did win, right?
Right.
All he was trying to do was set up another debate. So in other words,
right.
You know what I mean? He's calling himself out, and so everybody knows he lost, but and not to, I'm not a big fan of declaring winners and losers of debates, but I think that she handled him probably better than any man could have. And you and I have talked about this. Trump is one of those guys, that tries to portray this big masculine, front. And when they're just very afraid, or, use your own word, of women. And so I do think that there was a unique situation there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's a prosecutor, right? So there's a prosecutorial debate thing where she can think about these things a little differently when you're going back and forth. That's interesting. Wow. It was quite something. I think that, it's like no debates, no more debates. So we just kind of wade through to see what he keeps doing
And now,
in a bubble a little bit, maybe, because,
right.
Depending on what you're paying attention to or not paying attention to, where you get your information. I don't know. This is like, it's like the continuing saga of what he says or Van says is real or not real.
Right.
And that's just, it doesn't matter to them that it's debunked. It doesn't matter. And now, people will be hurt because of it. It's very sad.
Yeah, I mean, we can go through that and talk about all the, collateral damage from their lies and the hate that they spew. And you mentioned earlier about the Haitians and this, and if you don't mind, let's take a minute and talk about that. So everybody's heard by now that Trump says that there is this Haitian community in Springfield, Ohio, where J.D. Vance is from, that is capturing people's pets, cats and dogs, and eating them. So for those of you who don't know, let's just talk about the story, how this came about. First of all, there is this report that's about a year old, and it was on the local news, but it wasn't in Springfield. It was in Canton, Ohio. And it was about this, person who, and again, I don't remember names. It's irrelevant, but it was about this person who was obviously going through some sort of mental crisis break, whatever, who was doing that.
By the way.
Nope, not Haitian, white. And so it was on the news. Now they were.
So how does this get transferred then to the Haitian community?
Because I don't know, at the beginning of the school year, like 2 or 3, 4 weeks ago, when school started back for most people in mid-August, there was a bus accident in Springfield, Ohio, that was caused by a Haitian immigrant, and of course it was an accident, and there was a young boy who was killed as a result.
Oh.
And there were several injured, and the Haitian immigrant was charged with involuntary manslaughter and is in, being processed. I mean, he wasn't let off. And I think that that's how it got transferred to Springfield. Now, there is a large Haitian population there. And I think that, and there's, if you look up why they're there, it's because they needed
refugees,
workers. They need workers.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we could, but that's why. But then this child's parents, this is the worst part. The child's parents, the child who passed away, who was 11 years old, they appealed to the community to stop using their child as a political prop.
Yeah.
And now they're being attacked by the far right.
Oh,
and it's pretty vicious. It's pretty
awful.
Vicious. So, I think that, what do I think, the grand scheme, does this mean? I don't know. I don't know.
Either. It feels like they find the Trump people, or Trump himself, J.D. Vance, whoever, find these sort of long-standing, sort of racist, xenophobic tropes like that. We know, there was always stories of Chinese immigrants eating dogs, or restaurants that were serving dog meat or selling dog meat, or like these conversations have been happening for a long time, and it's basically usually debunked, usually just, again, racist, xenophobic, like trying to stir up fear or misunderstanding. I find it so interesting that in this understanding, when you go back to the reality of why they were in this community, because of the strife in their own country, but also like they need workers. We live in this society this way in Iowa where, and in different states like ours, where population's dwindling, right? There's a lack of workers. There's a lack of companies don't want to come here. You can't get skilled workers. The economy hurts because of it. Companies that need really, really highly skilled workers, they see what's happening to the education system. They see what's happening to the way the policies are shaping that is not that are not embracing of different ideas or that sort of thing. And then they don't come here,
Right.
and there's no way to fix that piece unless you have people moving in, because the birth rate's not high enough. We're in a situation where it's so multi-layered dynamic of what's happening right now. And I just don't understand how this is what's best for the people in the state, or what's best for the people in the country. I guess, we see things differently, but even when, from a Democrat, Republican, but even when you're just having the conversation about what needs to happen, it just becomes this very difficult conversation to have. How do you fix the education system? It's multi-layered. How do you fix your, whatever? And in here, which I was going to bring up just as something separate that's interesting, because a friend of mine got hired to be Kamala's rural organizing director, which is great. He's very smart. He worked with them here in Iowa. He understands the rural community. There's only so much Democrats can do. But we were sort of texting back and forth this morning, and I said one of the things that isn't mentioned in her 2-page report is that there's literally OBGYN deserts here. There's 33 counties that you can't get care, which means not only can you not have a cesarean section, there's not a maternity ward, you can't have a baby, you can't have a hysterectomy. The services don't exist. And when you talk about where you have to go, you have to drive 30 miles to an hour and a half to do that. And then you wonder why our population is where it's at, or why what's happening. And it's not like on the top of the bucket list to fix.
Right. And I think, look, you and I've talked a lot about this xenophobic message that Trump has, amplified, and how susceptible, people are. We talked about this a lot, and this has been a revelation to me, frankly. Now, I've always lived in coastal states,
right?
And I've always, and that makes a big difference, folks. I mean, if you come from a state that has dealt with immigration on some level in a way that is become more commonplace, I mean, that makes a huge difference in terms of how they respond, and so how voters respond. But it's been just, it's something I didn't expect and couldn't have predicted. And I always believed that we would have to hit, there had to be a tipping point on this. Now, in terms of it was going to get way worse before it got better, because that's how. And so I still believe that. I do think that this particular, it's fascinating, again, not surprising, because we've seen so often how these Republican lawmakers are so eager to line up behind him when he says these ridiculous things.
Well, not only that, but they use policy. Here's another thing interesting that I was going to ask you about. I don't know where we are in time, but the other thing I've noticed is when I do watch the cable news, when it is debate night or other times, like the surrogates they use are governors. It's Newsom, it's Shapiro, it's Whitmer. I don't see members of Congress as much. Maybe this is just my snippet of where I can pay attention. You don't see as many senators, you don't see other people, but what do you think about that? And then I want to ask you, because you have kids who are in the era, and maybe we can get Grace back on here. Speaking of eras, like
Yeah.
Taylor Swift endorsed. So those are my
Yeah.
two questions for you. I don't know what it means. I saw some reports that were, 400,000 people or something like that had registered to vote. So I think that's a big deal. So tell me about all these questions that I have kind of for you, separate than the debate.
Well, I think that, I mean, obviously, I'm glad she did it. Because, and again, this is it's because it drives Trump crazy.
Oh
And
yeah, that's true.
he
Even
can't,
more after a debate like that.
and he can't attack her for obvious reasons. Okay? He
I
can't
know. So
attack
he's like,
her.
I like Brittany Mahomes better or something
Yeah.
like that.
And by the
Yeah,
way, if you're Patrick Mahomes, you're like, shut up. I mean,
I
the last
know.
thing he wants is that. Okay?
Yeah,
Now, he doesn't want to be, he doesn't want anything to, I mean,
no.
right. He doesn't want to be dragged into this. And so I'm glad she did it. But also, do I think it makes a difference? I hope so. But you and I know, Jess, that, this is kind of one of my whatever pet peeves, whatever, it is getting somebody registered is just one step of a very important process. And
Yeah.
you and I consult on this with groups and clients all the time, candidates, who, especially people who are like, I want to bring new people in. Oh, okay. Well, that takes a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
And again, so I hope it does. And, getting them registered is step one. Now it's
Well,
been,
she might be able to do some GOTV
yeah,
stuff, or when they get the big dogs out in October or something. Go back to
absolutely.
the governor thing. Do you see that, or is it just me who sees that?
No, absolutely. And
Do you know why? I mean, I think it's very fascinating, but I don't know why.
well, it's an interesting, I don't know either. I mean,
Maybe they're I don't know what
I think
they're
they're
up in
more
cycle.
popular. Well, I
Yeah.
just think they're more popular than the senators. And I think that, the senators may have like some unspoken, agreement that, they're not going to say anything that might put a Sherrod Brown in a weird position where he's having to defend them or
Oh,
defend something
sure.
they said. I mean, you
But
know
there's
how
out
this
of
goes,
cycle people, right?
right? I know. And so I don't know. I mean, um, I think that Gretchen Whitmer, Shapiro, what,
Newsom.
Newsom, thank you,
Hmm.
Westmore. I mean, which
I
he's from,
know.
yeah, those guys are just more popular right now with the
Yeah.
base. And I that's my only explanation.
Yeah.
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 But it was, I hope and pray that this Taylor Swift thing makes a difference, because obviously the Trump policies, I believe, um, they affect women in big ways. They affect the
Yeah.
rights of women, and in a ways that I don't think people purely appreciate.
There's been some interesting conversations amongst the evangelicals about uh, Trump's policies and his waffling on abortion rights, which is
Mm-hmm.
so interesting that, I know fracking is a big deal. I don't want to underestimate fracking, but I have abortion rates are a little bit higher. And,
Uh-huh.
like, so uh, for most people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting to hear how they come down. I've heard a number of them in interviews where they'll say, not my choice, but, look at what Kamala will do. Fascinating that they haven't moved away or at least avoided those conversations because they're not doing it. They're
Mm-hmm.
sticking with him. It's hard to rectify
Right.
because it's just an abortion position. And, I think what they're saying, but without saying it is, Trump will say anything to get elected,
Yeah.
and he'll be with us when he's in office, or his people will be with
Mm-hmm.
us when they're in office, you know?
Right. And I think, yes, right. I totally agree. And we should point out that Trump is in desperation mode. And when somebody like him is in desperation mode, he will say anything. And so we should expect that he'll say anything.
So do we think this helped Kamala, hurt Trump? The polls are what? I don't
Yeah.
know. You know,
Right.
what do you think?
I think that, obviously it helped her. But look, she still has a headwind. And I know that when I talk to my progressive friends, and they don't like to hear that. And it was never going to be, look, what used to be, if you won by 5, 6, 7 points, that used to be a landslide. Now a landslide is going to be more like 3 or 4. Because
Yeah,
of the,
I mean, it's 20, 30,000 votes in Wisconsin,
right,
50, 60,000 votes, I think maybe less in Michigan, Pennsylvania, extremely tight, just
very tight.
and yeah, and because we have the Electoral College, we're in this situation, right?
Right. And
which is a interesting conversation to have at some point, but yeah.
And I think, you and I should have as we get closer to election day and people start voting, which is very soon. We should talk about that. We should go state by state. We should talk about the specific laws in that state, and how this plays into, kind of the broader picture. So, I love it when the Republicans are always like, we want to go back to the days when, it was all decided on election night. And the reason why we think there's fraud is because it doesn't happen like that anymore. And then I just,
okay, so this is interesting. The Republican Party of Iowa chair, so I do give my Iowa bits because I hear more Iowa news, was pushing people to vote early.
Yep.
So this is a new thing now. The Republicans are now pushing people to vote early. Why do you think that is? Because you think that they're with Trump now and maybe they changed their minds, or it's they shunned it. They went from 40 days here of early vote to 20 days. They talked about all the fraud, and now, it's all different. So,
right. And I think that for them, they realized that for them to win, they need a high turnout number. This used to be how Democrats behaved, which is why they always. So anyway, but like, for example, they're going back to the younger folks. I know Trump is trying to woo young men, like, let's call it 18 to 30. Okay. And young men, white men. And I'm telling black men too. I mean, let's just throw them in. Well, okay, good luck with that. They don't vote.
Well, that's the interesting issue, because that's where your higher turnout comes from. So, right. So it used to be where Democrats didn't vote, and then if the turnout was higher. Anyway, now it's the people who are the unreliable Trump voters or whatever. So if they come out, if it's a high turnout, then Trump will do well.
Absolutely. So I understand that, but I also, but like, this idea that they kind of go back and forth about, and it's very much a Republican conservative thing. So like, or MAGA thing, where they go back and forth about, we're for early voting, we're against it, we're for absentee, we're against it. And then when, you can't, because of the individual, and again, this just because of the individual laws in certain states, for example, in Pennsylvania, they are not allowed to start counting these early votes, absentee votes, until the polls close on election day.
Oh, right.
So, and again, so then the far right screaming about this, when, okay, then you have to explain to them. The reason why is because if you have an early vote or an absentee, there's like 2 or 3 or 4, guardrails that are up to check signatures and make sure it's not, because you guys are screaming fraud.
Right.
And now you can't have it. You want it this way. You can't, you want it to be decided on election night. I mean, look.
I never thought about it that way. That's great. That's a great point.
And point. it's like, look, there's no room for nuanced thought anymore. You've heard me say that so often.
No, it's so true. It's so true.
So it's like, so anyway, well, we should do that. We should talk as it gets closer to election day, like what's happening in these states and what is the big picture. And like, for example, we're doing work right now. You and I are doing work in Southern California for a client. And everything happened way earlier because they're doing all mail-in ballots.
Right. That's
and
right.
those go out like at the beginning of October. So everything we're doing is, is before that. So anyway, just a little bit of something to.
So it's happy Friday, everybody, right? It's Friday. It's the weekend almost. So looking forward to that, I guess. So here's a brief little recap about what's happened this week. And thanks for listening again. We'll be back next week. And any input?
If you have anything you want us to know, please send it to thediveinpod@gmail.com and we'll tackle it. Okay?
Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.